Welcome, friends. We're joining in a somber service. It's a little different to most services that we'll do. Throughout the day, we're going to sit with Jesus and reflect on everything he experienced Good Friday, 2,000 years ago. We're going to begin with a couple of readings and then just move into some thoughts on the crucifixion. The service is designed to help us contemplate. It's not supposed to be clever. It's not supposed to be mind-blowing. It's simply we sit and we contemplate with Jesus who loves us. So we begin with Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer. By night, but I find no rest. Yet you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the Holy One Israel praises. In you our ancestors put their trust. They trusted and you delivered them. To you they cried out and were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone, despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord, they say. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. Matthew 27. As they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha. There they offered Jesus wine to drink, mixed with gall. But after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided up their clothes by casting lots. And sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Every single one of the writers of Jesus' crucifixion skips over what you might call gory details. The moment of crucifixion is a moment and then gone. We sit for a while around the cross, but there's no over-the-top descriptions. There's no long discourses on what exactly was happening. Have you ever wondered why? I wonder if it was just because the idea of the cross was so ever-present in the minds of people there. To us, it's this thing that was done a long time ago. But to them, it was this thing that happened so regularly. The Romans had crucified thousands of Jewish people as they'd taken over the area known as Palestine. The cross was a constant presence. 2 other people were crucified the day Jesus died. It tells us that this to them was normal. To the Romans, it was a task. Crucifixion was designed to be easy and to have maximum pain. It was designed to stretch out death, but the actual process of crucifying someone was remarkably quick, almost as quick as the description that we read. They crucified him there. And then it moves on. There was a saying in Rome, even the thought of the cross be far from a Roman citizen. The whole process was so awful that Romans refused to talk about it, refused to accept that it was something that could ever happen to a Roman citizen. Roman citizens were given quick, easy deaths, like beheading. Crucifixion was reserved for the worst of the worst, reserved for non-Romans, for people like Jesus that were suspected of being leading a rebellion. Just a few words, and we're into 6 hours that Jesus' death by crucifixion took 2,000 years ago. And we as his followers sit and stand, much like his first followers would have done. And we realize the awfulness of what we're viewing. We get to sit this side of Easter. We're people of resurrection. And so it's so easy for us to bypass the idea of the cross. But for just these moments, at 9, at 12, and at 3, we're going to sit with our Jesus who loves us and experience a little of what he's experiencing. This service is going to be a little different in some other ways. We're going to use a little more liturgy, a little more formal prayers, because those things help us process at times like this. So we're going to head into our first thoughts. As Jesus begins his journey to the cross, he's already tired. Already, he's been beaten. He's been up all night. He's been walked through mock trial after mock trial. And after a long, hard walk, he arrives at the crucifixion spot. The open, bleeding wounds have sweat pouring into them and sting. The feel of the wood stings. The lashing of the crowd stings. Jesus is there for all to see, broken, beaten down. And then there's the moment of crucifixion itself. In those moments, he's placed on a cross and his hands are nailed to the woodwork. Have you ever thought about what that means or what that looked like? Think about those hands for a second. Those are his Father's hands. Those are not the hands of a man. Those are hands of God. But they're also human hands. The musician Sting tells this incredibly emotional story about sitting with his dad in hospital in the last moments. And he talks about how in those moments he looks down and he sees his father's hands. And as they sit there with almost nothing to say in that moment, that sacred moment, he says, Dad, your hands are the same as mine. And his dad looks at him and says, yes, son, they are. But you've used your hands better than I've used mine. Sting talks about the emotion of that moment. Talks about how in that moment it's the first time that his dad has ever said anything positive about what he does. Ever acknowledged that he had any kind of talent, ever acknowledged that his achievements were worth something. And it all begins with that moment of those hands are the same as mine. Jesus' hands are his Father's hands. They did incredible things on earth. These are the hands that stopped waves, that when he spoke, he lifted up his hand, the waves stopped moving, the storm stopped. These are the hands that healed a blind man. These are the hands that touched the face of a leper when no one else would touch them. These are the hands that lifted a prostitute from the ground when she was being stoned by men all around her. These are the hands that did these incredible things. Couldn't these hands of in this moment stop the nails? We know that on Maundy Thursday, just the night before, Jesus has wrestled with this moment of, oh, Father, your will or my will? What do I do? And he finally ends with this incredible prayer, not my will, but your will be done. Was he tempted in this moment again to say, what about my will? Those hands could have stopped those nails, and they don't. Jesus' hands aren't just the hands of his Father, they're human hands too. Imagine those hands of a carpenter. They say that hands are the biggest thing that ages you. You can tell someone's age most particularly by looking at their hands. They don't hide anything. They get weather-torn, they get beaten up, they get used. And Jesus' hands must have been used over and over again. He knew what it took to swing a hammer hard enough to put a nail through a piece of wood. And so we sit with him and we imagine that moment where he watches those nails driven into his own hands. As a carpenter, he knew what it took. As God, he knew what it meant. The cross itself, this thing that we watch Jesus nail to, is this simple structure. It's two beams, one upright, one horizontal. The writer Max Lucado talks about how he sees a beauty in this design, beauty in this horrible instrument of crucifixion. The first piece of wood, it stands upright like God's holiness. God is holy, he's perfect. And the second one stretches out like God's love, which is wide and vast. How does God choose between his holiness and his love? Through the cross, he doesn't have to. That's the incredible news of it. In that moment, Jesus stretches out his hands and has them nailed in the position of embrace. So you and I would know that we are loved. Simply know that we are loved. You are loved by the God of the universe, this God that we're sitting with at the foot of a cross. He died loving you. We're going to move on tomorrow or Sunday to all the joy of resurrection, but at this moment we're sitting with Jesus. Jesus said this, "And I, when I am lifted up from the cross, will draw all people to myself." To his followers, these words of Jesus from the Gospel of John speak of the power of the cross to contain and unfold all the horror, pain, and grief of the world in God's uncompromising and enduring embrace of love. The cross is not merely our redemption, but also our reconciliation and restoration to God and to one another. You are loved. Jesus, we sit at the foot of your cross and we're contemplating. We're thinking of all that you've done and all that you mean. We trust your offer of embrace. We know that we are loved.
Survey the wondrous cross on which the Prince of Glory died. My richest gain I count but lost, and pour content on all my pride. See from his head, his hands, his feet, sorrow and love flowed mingled down. Did e'er such love and sorrow meet, or thorns compose so rich a crown? Oh, the wonderful cross! Oh, the wonderful cross bids me come and die, and find that I may truly live. Oh, the wonderful cross! Oh, the wonderful cross! All who gather near by grace draw near and bless your name. O'er the whole realm of nature mine, that were an offering far too small. Love so amazing, so divine, demands my soul, my life, my all. Oh, the wonderful cross! Oh, the wonderful cross bids me come and die, and find that so amazing, so divine, demands my soul, my life, my all.
We sit again, friends, with Jesus and his journey through the cross. And we start again with reading from the Bible. Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish. My God, I cry out to you day by day, but you do not answer. By night, I find no rest. Yet you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the one Israel praises. In you our ancestors put their trust. They trusted and you delivered them. To you they cried out and were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone, despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord, they say. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "Who are you who is going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days? Save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests and teachers of the law and the elders mocked him. He saved others, they said, but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, I am the Son of God. In the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. From noon until 3, in the land, darkness came over all the land. About 3 p.m, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of those standing there heard this, they said, he's calling Elijah. And immediately one ran and filled it with got a sponge and filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a staff and offered it to drink. The rest said, now leave him alone. Let us see if Elijah comes to save him. We're 3 hours in to Jesus' journey on the cross. It's hard to do anything for 3 hours. Just think about that time and how it passes. Other than sleeping, there's not much that you can do for 3 hours without it feeling like a considerable period of time. And yet Jesus has now been on the cross for 3 hours. We talked a little bit earlier about how the cross was designed to maximize suffering. It's essentially death by suffocation. The way that the person is held on the cross makes it almost impossible to breathe without lifting yourself up, and then lifting yourself up becomes harder and harder as your feet push against nails, as your strength disappears in the heat of the sun. 3 hours of fighting to breathe. 3 hours fighting against pain. 3 hours feeling the burning heat of the sun. Jesus has been at this for 3 hours. Death by crucifixion was drawn out and could last for days at time. But what we know of Jesus' journey, he's halfway in. And we sit with him. In the midst of his suffering, all he's done is spoken of forgiveness. In the midst of his own personal trial, his pain, Jesus' thoughts have been on others. He's offered forgiveness to a thief who sits on who's crucified to the side of him. He's spoken of forgiveness to about everyone who has been involved in the process of this. He's cried out, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. In the midst of his struggles, Jesus has managed to look at others and try and understand. Try and realize that those who have hurt us haven't always meant to hurt us. That for many of them, there is their own brokenness that they're dealing with. The one that hurt us has often been hurt. Hurt people, hurt people. Jesus, in the midst of everything awful about what he's going through, chooses that path of forgiveness. And now it's noon, and suddenly something changes. At noon, everything goes dark. Is it just heavy clouds? Is it some kind of solar eclipse? We don't know. Is it a supernatural darkness? But that darkness will last from 12 until 3. We don't know what causes it, but we do get a hint of what it's connected to. Towards the end of his time on the cross, Jesus will cry out the words that we just read, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. They mean, my God, why have you forsaken me? In that moment, in those moments of darkness, those hours of darkness, what we know is that Jesus feels the absence of his Father. Now, this is really incredible because the one thing that has been the hallmark of Jesus' life has been presence and the presence of God. We read all these stories, editorial additions to the gospel stories, where it will say something like Jesus got up early in the morning and he went out. And he spent time alone with his Father. It speaks of this intimate, beautiful relationship, a relationship that many of you have with God. Maybe you rise early, maybe you stay up late, but your relationship with God is conversational. And you've had those moments, as I've had those moments of experiencing God's presence. And imagine the depth to which Jesus, the Son of God, who does these practices day after day, imagine the depth of presence that he experiences. And other people have known that presence through him. There's been a sense for them of, this man is different. He does things in a different way. God uses him, speaks through him in a way that he doesn't speak through others. And now, Jesus, who has known this intimacy with his Father, now he's alone. And he quotes those words from our psalm that we're focusing on throughout this Good Friday experience. Those words, my God, why have you forsaken me? And in that way, he mirrors that feeling each one of us have had at times of being alone, of being bewildered, of not being able to understand where we are. Just like the darkness speaks to what Jesus is experiencing. Maybe we use that phrase, moments of darkness, moments where we're left confused and hurting. I have this memory of as a child. I was about 5 or 6 years old. And I remember my parents being late to pick me up for school. And I remember the feeling as slowly the playground emptied. Person after person was picked up and went home. And just feeling that silence of nobody being around. I'm sure there were teachers in the school somewhere. I'm sure they hadn't all just driven off. I'm sure there was someone who was in some way in charge. I'm sure I wasn't just a 6-year-old left by themselves. But in that moment, at that time, I felt deeply alone. And I remember trying to channel some kind of inner connection and trying to figure out, my mother, who I know loves me, my father, who I know loves me, are they thinking of me? Have they just forgotten me? Or are they desperate to get to me too? Is there a sense for them of, I can't believe I've left him there by himself? I don't know the answers to all those questions. This was back before having a cell phone where they could just pick up and call me and say, I'm going to be a little late, and maybe I wouldn't have had a cell phone as a 6-year-old anyway, but I remember that sense of loneliness, that sense of, why is this happening? How will this end up? Now, I'm not saying in any way that my suffering was similar to what we're experiencing from Jesus, but what I am saying is I experienced that sense of being alone. And right now in that cry from Psalm 22, that's what Jesus is experiencing. For the first time, he feels absence from his Father. And in doing that, he embraces the experience every single one of us will have as humans. You at some point have felt alone. And if you haven't yet, you will at some point. Maybe it's a diagnosis that you didn't want to hear. And suddenly you feel alone. Maybe it's the end of a marriage, or the beginnings of an end of a marriage. Maybe it's the final moment where the divorce is finalized. Maybe it's the death of a loved one. where you sit and look at a seat that used to be filled and it's no longer filled. Every single one of us has sat there or will sit there and say something close to, my God, why have you forsaken me? And Jesus in this moment embraces all of that. Jesus in that moment experiences what it is for everyone around him to look and say, I told you so. That's the story we read with the religious leaders and the crowds. Let us see if God comes to save me, if God loves him so much. Let him come and rescue him now. Unaware, of course, that God's choice not to rescue him, the Father's choice to leave his Son on the cross to turn his back, would mean life for every single one of them. I think this moment where God experiences darkness, allows us to reflect on those all around the world right now that are experiencing that in particular ways. And I'd love it if you'd join me as we close and move on to a piece of worship with a devotion or a prayer that includes them. God, for the hungry and the homeless, the destitute and oppressed, for the sick, the wounded, and the crippled, for those in loneliness, fear, and anguish, for those who face temptation, doubt, and despair, for the sorrowful and bereaved, for prisoners and captives, for those in mortal danger, that God, you in your mercy would comfort and relieve them, and grant them the knowledge of your love, and stir up in us the will and patience to minister to those needs. Gracious God, the comfort of all who sorrow and the strength of all who suffer, let the cry of those in misery and need come to you, that they may find your mercy present with them in all their afflictions, and give us, we pray, the strength to serve them for the sake of him who suffered for us, your Son Jesus, our Lord. Amen. We close this session with this idea. You are not alone. You are not alone. You are not alone.
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they laid him in the to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they laid him in the tomb?
For the final time, we sit with Jesus. Throughout his experiences on the cross, it's 3 p.m., the final sacred moments. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out to you by day, but you do not answer by night. I find no rest. Yet you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the one Israel praises. In you our ancestors put their trust. They trusted and you delivered them. To you they cried out and were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone, despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord, they say. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights him. Yet you brought me out of the womb. You made me trust in you, even at my mother's breast. From birth I was cast on you. From my mother's womb, you have been my God. Later, knowing that everything had now been finished, and so the scripture would be fulfilled, Jesus said, I'm thirsty. A jar of wine vinegar was there, so they soaked a sponge in it, put the sponge on the stalk of the hyssop plant, and lifted it to Jesus' lips. When he had received the drink, Jesus said, it is finished. With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. It is finished. It is finished. Jesus tells the world moments before his death, it is finished. What would that have meant to them? To the Romans, it must have been obvious. Of course it's finished. We're very good at doing this. We've put hundreds, thousands of people through this process of crucifixion, and it always finishes the same way. There is no life at the end of crucifixion. There is only one finish. It is death. It is death. What would it have meant to the disciples, those earliest followers of Jesus? Think about all they've been through over the last 24 hours. They've sat with Jesus for a meal in which it's really obvious that they haven't got the slightest clue what is about to happen. In the midst of Jesus pouring out his heart and telling them everything that he is about to go through, they sit and argue about who will be the greatest. It's this perfect example of how to misunderstand what a speaker is saying. Maybe they thought Jesus was a little down. Maybe they thought he'd got a little bit mopey over the last few days. In the midst of him outlining what needed to happen for the plan to work, they argue about who's the greatest. And then at the first sign of danger, they run away. They're gone. They disappear. And then during the time of crucifixion, they don't sit, they hide. They're distant. They are far gone. And what are they thinking? What does it is finished mean to them? What is finished? Their hopes and dreams are finished. They're done. Maybe the Romans will let them get away. Maybe they'll be satisfied with cutting off the head of the snake, as it were. Maybe they'll be satisfied with killing the leader of this rebellion as they see it. Maybe they'll let these men just disappear back off to whatever backwater towns they came from. Maybe they can get back to Nazareth and Galilee. Maybe they can go back to fishing or tax collecting or some kind of trade. But all of their hopes of what a kingdom in the future looks like, those are all done. Hiding away, scared, is the best that awaits them. We are people of the resurrection. We think of Sunday. We know the story in the light of Sunday. It's coming. It's around the corner. And yet think of these guys on Friday and even Saturday. What does it mean? It is finished. It is finished is terrible news. But what does it mean to Jesus? When Jesus says it is finished, what is he talking about? The answer lies in this moment that's in a couple of the other Gospels, but not in this one. There's this moment when Jesus dies, when he declares it is finished, that it says that the curtain in the temple, the holy place in the middle of Jerusalem, was was ripped in two, torn from top to bottom. That's what's finished. What does that mean? To understand it, we need to know a little bit about temple geography, because everything about Jerusalem told you where you fit into the plan, where you belonged. You could go to Jerusalem. Anyone could go to Jerusalem. And anyone could walk up the steps towards the temple court. Anyone could walk into the first level, the court of the Gentiles. So long as you didn't misbehave, do anything ostentatious, you were allowed there. And then eventually you'd come to a point where there was a sign, which said essentially something, not verbatim, but close to. No one not Jewish beyond this point. The moment a non-Jewish person steps beyond here, you're as good as dead. And then you move inside, and so you're into a place that only Jewish people could go, and then finally there's a place where only Jewish men could go, and then in the next level there's a place where only Jewish Levites and priests could go, and finally only Jewish priests, and then finally to the center point, this moment where there's a place that only the high priest could go, and only him once a year, and he covered himself with blood just for protection. It's quite possible that he could be struck down at the moment he walked through the curtain. Because behind this curtain is everything that Jewish people considered holy. Everything Jews considered holy was there. The Ten Commandments would have been there at some point. Moses' staff, all these things that they held to be sacred. But most of all, on the Ark of the Covenant, there was a place called the Mercy Seat, and there it was believed that God's presence actually dwelt in a particular way. That was where God was in a way that he wasn't anywhere else. So when that curtain rips, that means a couple of things. It means that you can go in, I can go in. Suddenly the access was there. But in this bigger way, it means that God moved out. It means that God would no longer be found just in that spot. That God's presence would now be found in the hearts of people like you and me, hearts of his followers. That's this incredible thing that Jesus is finishing. The old thing is gone and a new thing is dawning in that moment when he says it's finished. He kind of means it's finished, but he also, in this incredible way, kind of means it's just begun. Suddenly the holiest place isn't in the temple, but it's in places like where Jesus and his followers were the night before, gathered in a table in communion. When you take communion, you're remembering that thing, that God's presence is there in a way that it isn't anywhere else, that God's presence is there when anyone gathers together in his name. This is what Jesus is doing. He finished this old thing and he started this new thing. When we sit with Jesus in his final moments, that's what he's talking about. That's what's finished. And that's what we remember. This is grace. Perhaps you've tried to sneak into a party or an event or something like that. You've tried to get to a level of access that you don't have. Maybe you've got some kind of security clearance. You've said, I'm going to try and get some information, and you've been told at some point, no, this is as far as you come. That's what the purity concept was all about. Eventually, everyone reached their point, without exception. Jesus changes all of that. You and I are welcomed into the presence of God in a particular way, and that's what's different. The old thing is finished. The new thing has come. You are forgiven. The moment you turn to this Jesus, you are forgiven. Access through this Jesus will always be there for you and for I. That's the journey of the cross, and that's what we celebrate. And we're going to close with this idea, with this prayer. O God of unchangeable power and eternal light, look down on your church, that wonderful church, that mystery, that place of your presence. May we know your presence in new ways, in new and powerful ways. Let the whole world see and know that things which were cast down are being raised up. Things which are grown old are being made new. All in the name of your Son, Jesus, who lives and reigns with you. In some of Paul's writing, it says this: God was pleased to reconcile all things to himself, whether in heaven or on earth, by making peace through the blood of the cross. That's our celebration on Good Friday. As we move towards resurrection and all of that means, we celebrate these three things on Good Friday. You are accepted. You are not alone. You are forgiven.
Your blood speaks a better word than all the empty claims I've heard upon this earth. Speaks righteousness for me and stands in my defense. Jesus, it's your blood. Your blood speaks a better word than all the empty claims heard upon this earth. Speaks righteousness for me, stands in my defense. Jesus, it's your blood. What can wash away our sins? What can make us whole again? Nothing but the blood, nothing but the blood of Jesus. What can wash us pure as snow, welcomed as the friends of God? Nothing but the blood, nothing but the blood of Jesus. Your cross testifies in grace, tells of the Father's heart to make a way for us. The boldly we proclaim, not earthly confidence. Jesus, it's your blood.